We've just finished another jam-packed week here at the World Economic Forum. Kevin is a veteran of these things. You know, each one of them follows a formula, right? Six. All right.
Yeah.
They all follow a formula, and they're all a little different. What was distinctive to you about this Davos?
This Davos did feel different for several reasons. One, who was not here, and who was here? Who was here? The great and the good of the business world. Huge attendance by CEOs from right across the globe. All the leading CEOs, I'd say, from the United States, but a heavy presence from Asia and, of course, Europe very well represented, and plenty from Latin America, given Bolsonaro from Brazil was here. Who was not here? Some of the world leaders. Previous Davos have been, I think, very political in the sense of listening to political speeches by political leaders. This Davos felt more like a business conversation. There were plenty of political leaders still here, but the business community's voice was the loudest. And so there was much more discussion around the issues confronting CEOs and the kind of challenges they face.
Yeah, and geographically, it also felt like Fareed Zakaria, who wrote a book a few years ago called Rise of the West. Rest, rather.
Rise of the Rest. Yes.
Not the West. And it felt a little bit like that, didn't it?
It did. I think, interestingly, lots of talk about China, even though China itself was only briefly on the agenda. Wang Qishan, who's the key advisor to President Xi, gave a speech in which he essentially said, don't believe what you read. The Chinese economy is doing just fine. A little softer, but doing just fine. Growth north of 600 basis points, 6%. So China was very much a feature. India, actually, interestingly, we didn't have the Indian finance minister. At one point, I was going to be in a panel, actually, with Jaitley. He didn't come. But there were a lot of Indian chief ministers here. And so India actually did feature quite a bit in a positive sense. People talking about India as the place where perhaps the world should be looking for growth. If China's going to slow, India will make up the difference. And so you definitely felt that Latin America was much more of a part of the conversation. I was on a panel with the governor of the Central Bank of Argentina. And obviously with, as I said, Bolsonaro here, lots of discussion around, so where is Latin America going? Is Brazil going to live up to all the promises that on the economic side Bolsonaro has made? And is Argentina going to be able to sort out its economy? But it was intriguing to hear Latin America very much a part of the conversation. That's not been the case in recent Davos events.
What was the mood?
I would say the mood was cautious, trending gloomy. In other words, a general unease. I usually begin when I meet CEOs, and gosh, I saw 30, 40, and all of us here have seen hundreds, literally, with a simple question, how's business? And the answer I got this year was pretty consistent. It was, my business is pretty good, started the year well, looks okay. But I'm really worried about everybody else's business. Yeah. And I think in that notion, there is this question around, is the concerns on the trade front, the possibility that the US, which has powered the rest of the world for quite some time with a very strong domestic economy, could get influenced by the shutdown? We can debate whether that's real or not, but there was a concern around that. Is consumer sentiment weakening? And are the emerging markets about to be caught up in a contagion as the dollar remains high and interest rates go up? Does that actually mean a lot of their dollar-denominated debt comes due at a time when they simply don't have the foreign currency reserves to offset that increase? That was the kind of sentiment that clouded things. And you just felt last year it was synchronous growth.
A little more cautious than last year.
Well, it was a lot more cautious because last year everybody was talking about synchronous growth.
Yeah.
The whole world is doing well. Yeah. This year, that's not the subject.
Right. Well, you mentioned a lot of good business conversations. What were some of the key either themes, takeaways that you felt like you were hearing? What was on people's minds?
AI, and AI in all forms. A real conversation around data and analytics. Frankly, one of the things that made me incredibly proud this week was our sold-out, absolutely packed breakfast, which was seen, I think, as one of the high points and regularly referenced. One of the high points of the week was the breakfast we hosted in a panel discussion where Vas Narasimhan from Novartis talked eloquently about the journey they've been on to place data and analytics at the heart of decision making. That conversation happened with lots of chief executives wanting to know how we approach that subject, what they should be doing. So that was the positive discussion, and broader than that, a real conversation about AI more generally and where we can see it being applied. Of course, and you may have seen this in some of the papers, a lot of discussion around the negative side. What's happening to privacy? Who owns the data? Where's the consumer in all of this? That was a part of the conversation too. And actually, will the digital divide between those who have access and those who don't lead to a more unequal world and create all sorts of issues on the social side? But overwhelmingly, AI was the number one topic. I think after that, of course, geopolitics. Davos lends itself to that conversation, where the China-US tension, of which trade is just one, I would argue, small part of that tension, but nevertheless a part of it, was very much on the minds of all delegates, because ultimately China has been a huge proportion of the world's growth. So a lot of discussion around how do supply chains get impacted. One of the reports we put out on globalization, looking at the MGI report that's just come out, I'd urge everyone to read it, really landed and was a big part of the discussion in all sorts of panels, regularly being cited, because it talks about two things. It talks about the emerging markets have been, for the first time, 50% of the counterparties in global trade. On the other hand, the trade that we've got now is a lot less dependent on labour arbitrage. It's much more about knowledge and skills. And you've got all these emerging market economies that existed from an economic point of view on the back of low labour costs. That's changing. How do they adapt? And the regionalisation of trade, with supply chains being regionalised as well. That was a big part of the discussion.
Yeah, I also heard a lot about the environment, sustainability, gender, the need to keep making progress. And I don't know if you heard this, but a lot of people talking about responsible leadership. I heard the phrase license to operate a lot.
No, I heard a lot of that. If you take this sort of environment topic, that was definitely out there. I should have mentioned it. One of the more memorable events was Matt Damon hosting water.org. We've actually done some very valuable work in that space for them, and they were talking a lot about, 1.5 is the new 2.0. In other words, all the assumptions we've had around global warming, if anything, have proven to be a bit too optimistic in terms of they're worse. They're actually turning out worse. David Attenborough made an incredibly impassioned and compelling speech about now's the hour. Now's the hour. The planet is ours to destroy. And he and Prince William, or Duke of Cambridge, excuse me, gave a very compelling talk about it's time to tackle the issues now because we're running out of time. Very compelling.
So how did our firm do at Davos? Did McKinsey have a good Davos? Did we cut through the noise? And what did we hear? What was some of the feedback?
Well, I can be completely objective and say we had a wonderful Davos, of course.
Of course.
We did have a good Davos. Yeah. We had a good Davos for many reasons. It was a great reminder to me that we have unbelievable clients who just love what we do and the way we do it. I saw dozens of CEOs, so did the rest of the team. And we heard just the greatest stories of impact. I had one CEO who's been a client for a journey which has seen him take his company, refocus the portfolio dramatically, break it up. And as he reflected on that journey, he said, I could not have done what I've done without McKinsey and Company. And we have created enormous value for our shareholders. We've created countless jobs. We've saved the business that frankly was otherwise going to go away. And it's because of the work you guys did. And I just felt so proud as I heard that story, but I heard that kind of story again and again and again. And to walk into panel after panel and hear people cite MGI or talk about McKinsey study did this or a McKinsey team did that, that was the dominant voice of Davos. And honestly, if I had to guess our share of voice in terms of the way people talked about us versus anyone else, I would say we had at least 70, 75%. Overwhelmingly positive, not uniformly, overwhelmingly positive, incredible support. And I just felt great listening to what people had to say. And sometimes it's a useful reminder, this was the global business leadership of the world. And their message to me was, thank you. You're doing great work. We really appreciate it. And we look forward to continuing that journey with you.
We've also had a chance to see a lot of people in their sort of broader constituency beyond our clients.
Yeah.
We've been in the news a lot positively and some negatively. Did you have any sense of what were those conversations like?
Well, I did a lot of media this week. I think it's part of my role is to represent us, and I do believe we have to be more transparent and willing to communicate who we are and what we do. So I did do a lot of media. And I get asked questions that are tough questions in the sense of, so your coverage hasn't been all positive, how do you react? And I've had a simple message. Look, I'm very proud of this firm. I've been here since 1989. I'm a part of a firm that's created jobs, saved companies, brings innovation to the world, and I think is a real force for good. So when I look at what's written, I can have one of two reactions. I can get angry and frustrated, or I can say, you know what, we're bigger than that. We're going to find a way to do what we've always done, which is take on board the criticism, admit any mistakes we've made, learn from them, and act. And I'm very determined we do the second. But to do it with real pride in who we are, real confidence in what we do. And I felt that when I sat down and shared that message with journalists, they sort of heard it. Because it's impossible to have been here without hearing all the good stuff we do. Yeah. And so they heard that too. Yeah. And that meant that the kind of conversation would quickly then turn to, so what do you think is going on? And How are you seeing the world? And of course, every CEO that I met has a challenge on their hands, which is to navigate a very complicated world with higher expectations and higher transparency. That's the challenge we face. But I think we can actually lead. I believe we can figure this out in a way that allows others to follow. And we'll do it because we know we're doing great client work, our clients are with us, and that we should feel really good about what we do.
So one of your rallying cries since you became managing partner has been what we do matters, and that's kind of what you're speaking to. So does Davos still matter, and does what we do at Davos matter?
Davos does still matter. It's hard to think of, in fact I think it's impossible to find any forum that brings together this number of business leaders and gives them the opportunity to engage with social sector leaders and public figures. Impossible to find any other forum. So yes, it matters. And I think it does matter that we are the benchmark here for what great professional service looks like. And I think that position which we've earned has been one that's grounded in the work we do. And so I think it does matter that we're here. I think it does matter that we put our best foot forward. And I think it really matters that we engage, show people who we are. By the way, I believe that matters for everyone who's watching this. Yeah. Because the greatest thing about the firm is when people meet the first-year business analyst or somebody who's an executive assistant and they see the quality of the people we have, that's when they realize why I may be saying things which sound like, well, he would say that, wouldn't he? But it's why I can say with conviction I'm really proud of what we do, because they see our people and they get proud too. So I would just say it's not just the folk that were here in Davos, and there were a lot of us, but it's the people that every day do the great work that enables our firm to have the reputation it does.
Well, Kevin, I know it's been a jam-packed week, as I said at the beginning, so you and all our colleagues have been incredibly busy, had long days.
Not a lot of sleep, but
not
it's
a lot
been
of sleep, but a lot of fun, yeah. So thank you for talking to us the firm. Yeah.
And thanks, everyone.